Welcome back to the Peptide Pulse, where science meets life-changing potential. I'm Dr. Adam Boonder, the peptide researcher, and today we're having one of the most important conversations in the peptide world. At least I believe it's probably one of the most important conversations in the peptide world. This is not about the glamorous peptide conversation of what does what or how you mix these things. This is not the episode where we talk about glowing skin, fast recovery, better sleep, fat loss, or feeling 10 years younger. I know that's what you wanted, but you got to listen in. Laser focus here today, guys. Today, we're talking about the side of the peptide world that most people do not want to discuss. It's the underground market, the gray market. In fact, a lot of times I call it the black market. The research chemical websites. In fact, a lot of them are even shutting down, including Peptide Sciences. The private groups, the vendors selling vials that say things like not for human consumption. Well, everyone knows exactly what many people are doing with them. And here's the hard truth. The peptide conversation has exploded faster than the safety conversation. The demand is massive. The curiosity is massive. The promise is real, but the sourcing problem is also real. And that's really where we got to get into today, because this is very serious. And if we don't talk about this clearly, honestly, and responsibly, people are going to be making decisions that honestly can, well, have incomplete information, but cause serious harm. So I want to share some research with you specifically. In San Francisco, Business Insider reported, okay, this is crazy. You read this. In San Francisco, Business Insider, listen here, reported on an invite-only California Peptide Club event held at AGI House, more than 100 people attended. Another 300 people were reportedly on a wait list. This is crazy. This is a peptide club. That matters because this is not fringe anymore. This is not just a small group of underground biohackers experimenting in silence. This has entered into the mainstream optimization conversation. In fact, a good friend of mine lives in Miami. He owns multiple clinics. He even said that right now he's hearing that people are Ubering peptides from place to place and person to person. This is a problem. People are hearing about BPC 157, TB 500, CJC 1295, ipamorelin, tesamorelin, MOTS-C, Humanin, Semax. We can go on, and all these next generation metabolic peptides. And they're not just curious. They're actually ordering. They're injecting themselves. They're stacking multiple peptides on top of themselves, and they don't even know what they're doing. They're literally experimenting on themselves. And, knowing the name of a peptide is not the same as actually knowing what is actually in the vial. I mean, there's a big difference there, and I really hope you understand that. Knowing the dose someone recommended online is not the same as knowing whether the product is actually sterile. Knowing the claimed purity on a website is not the same as knowing whether the product was tested by a legitimate third-party lab. Just showing a COA doesn't mean that it's right. It has to be a legitimate third-party lab. And that is where the danger really begins. So here's another research article. This is from JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association. One study evaluating no prescription online semaglutide products found the majority of the quality concerns. So here are the quality concerns. The samples contained semaglutide, labeled semaglutide, but reported purity was only 7% to 14%, even though the products were advertised as 99% pure. One sample also showed elevated endotoxins. I mean, this is real, people. I mean, if only 7 to 14% of that product is what you're supposed to be getting, what is it? Someone thinks they're actually injecting a carefully calculated dose, but if that vial is underdosed, overdosed, contaminated, mislabeled, low purity, the math doesn't matter. The protocol doesn't matter. The Reddit dosing chart doesn't matter, because the foundation is completely wrong. That is the peptide market nobody wants to talk about until somebody actually gets hurt. In fact, people are getting hurt. This is crazy. We have to do something. You have to be aware. After the first major research gut punch, really, to me, is showing what's happening. If you've ever ordered peptides online, or if you know someone who has, make sure that you're subscribing now. Not because I want to scare you, but honestly because this conversation could change the decision someone makes before they inject something into their body. And when I got into the space to educate and help and bring information as the peptide researcher and real life stories, it was to make sure that people were getting well. that they were transforming their lives for the better, optimizing their systems. And I think that that needs to be taken into account. So make sure you subscribe because this information needs to get out there. People can get hurt. And it's not the peptide, it's the sourcing. So how contamination and quality failure actually happens, I want to share that with you today. So how does it happen? How does a vial that looks clean, professional, and sterile end up being a major unknown? The answer, honestly, is the supply chain. Most people only see the last step. They see the website, they see the product image, they see the label, they see the claimed milligrams, and they see a COA. If there is even one. Sometimes they don't even show that, but they claim it, or it's online, and it doesn't say that it was, they say it's in-house, or we tested our own. That could have been on one vial, maybe not a lot, meaning lot as a batch of product that came in. They don't see where the raw material came from. They don't see whether the facility was operating under pharmaceutical standards, like ISO certifications, CGMP. There's a lot of standards that need to be in place. They don't see whether sterile handling procedures were followed. They don't see whether the peptide was properly characterized. They don't see whether the solvent residues, degradation products, the endotoxins, or other contaminants are actually present. Ultimately, if you're going to be injecting something, it needs to be done in a sterile environment, not just having a COA. And they definitely do not know whether the COA actually matches the vial in their hand. That is why the phrase research use only matters, or not for human consumption. When a product is labeled for research use only or not for human consumption, that is not just a legal, declaration. It's not just a legal, statement. The label is telling you something. It's telling you the product is not being sold as a prescription medication or for human use. So the label matters. It's not being held to the same standard. Because again, a COA doesn't mean that there's no endotoxins. That COA doesn't mean that it's sterile. It's not moving through the same clinical oversight. You're not being directed. And when consumers use that product anyway, the risk shifts onto the buyer. And so I want to share another research. I'm bringing a lot of research into this because I think we really need to see this. But, right here, discussing specifically with the FDA. And I know FDA people don't like, but ultimately it's about safety. So what this is the FDA has warned that some products containing semaglutide, tirzepatide, even retatrutide have been sold directly to consumers while being labeled for research use only or not for human consumption. The FDA states that unapproved versions, unapproved versions do not undergo the FDA review for safety, effectiveness, and quality before they are marked. So that phrase alone, unknown quality is the key. There's standards that be set in place. Trust me, FDA does things good, they do some things bad. And, we know that there's a lot of stuff out there that can help us, but the truth is, it's a standard of a process that it has to go through. Traceability of a product. Where did it come from? Where's the raw material? What testing did it go through? Not just a COA. Unknown quality means you do not know if the peptide is what it claims to be. Unknown quality means you do not know if the dose is accurate. Unknown quality means you do not know if the product is sterile. Unknown quality means you do not know if the endotoxins are present. Unknown quality means you do not know if the product contains impurities, degradation products, or contaminants. And for an injectable product, that's actually a very serious problem. Because when you inject something, it's very different than just swallowing something. And I know that peptides come in oral form and injectable form, but there's a distinct difference between injecting something and actually swallowing something. Injection bypasses many of the body's natural barriers. That means sterility matters, endotoxin testing matters, identifying the testing matters, identifying what's in there, potency testing matters, heavy metal screening matters, microbial testing matters, and not all COAs are created equal. A COA, and I can harp on COAs, I've talked about them before, they are not the end-all be-all. In fact, COAs have given this industry in the gray and the black market of peptides really the attention that it's needed to start to standardize things, because that's really not the standard. A COA is not just the standard. It's a tool that gives you information, but most of those COAs don't have everything that's needed. A COA from the same company selling the product is not the same as a lot-specific test from an independent lab. A purity number itself is not enough. So a pretty PDF, quite honestly, is not enough. But it's gotten the industry in trouble because people were selling peptides based off of a COA, not off of its purity and the standards that it takes to actually create it. You need traceability, you need testing, you need accountability. And that is the difference between a clinical standard and an online gamble. And most of you are gambling right now. So what I really want to get into right now is talk about what is the real cost to people, because the danger here is not only theoretical. The real cost is not just money. It's not just, can we be healthy? Can it be trust? Can it be time? It can be a person's entire healing journey. We have to trust what's coming to us and where it's coming from. Here is what happens. Someone orders a peptide online because they're trying to recover from an injury. Maybe they're dealing with chronic pain. Maybe, they're trying to lose weight. Maybe they're trying to improve energy, sleep, inflammation, recovery performance, because maybe it's a mom that just needs that extra energy. Maybe it's a friend that's trying to lose weight and they haven't been able to for years. Most of these people are not trying to be reckless. They're trying to solve a problem. And sometimes they feel better, honestly, at first, but then something goes wrong. They develop an injection site reaction, which can be common, but it doesn't go away. They all of a sudden have these flu-like symptoms. They experience unexpected side effects. And if you're listening, some of you may have experienced this. They realize the product was not dosed correctly, or they find out that the vial they trusted may not have been what it actually claimed to be. They realize that the, HP printer label isn't the same as something that comes from an actual pharmacy. Now, that person does not just distrust the vendor, they distrust peptides, they distrust the science, they distrust the providers, they distrust the entire category. And that is one of the biggest tragedies of this underground peptide market. Bad sourcing gets confused with bad science. And those are not the same thing. A poorly sourced product does not disprove peptide biology. A contaminated product does not mean the peptide, concept is completely flawed. A mislabeled vial does not mean clinical peptide therapy has no future. It means the supply chain failed. It means oversight failed. It means the consumer was placed in a position they never should have been in the first place. It means that trust has been lost. And so I actually want to share a story. I was speaking at a conference a couple weeks ago, and a good friend of mine came up to me, and he was on one peptide. It was retatrutide. Unfortunately, my friend had a heart attack and a stroke, and they were doing blood work on him, and he was not on anything else. Just this one peptide that he had bought from an online vendor of retatrutide to help with his weight loss, his energy, all the benefits that come from that. What came back blew his mind, because when they tested his blood, they actually found fentanyl in his system. If that doesn't scare you, and again, I'm not trying to scare you, you know what I should say instead of scare you? If that doesn't open up your eyes to what's happening in this market, I don't know what will. He's just one. Think of all the other people that purchased from that vendor. You have to know the traceability of what is coming from that source. I've seen this kind of situation firsthand, obviously with my friend. That's just one story. Someone thinks they're being proactive, they're doing something, they've done the research, they have watched the videos, they have the protocol, but they don't have the verified sourcing. No legitimate documentation, no provider oversight, no real way to know what is actually in that vial. So before we can even talk about optimization, we have to go back to the safety. Safety first, people, come on. We have to stop guessing. And I'm a big advocate of peptides. I love peptides. I mean, this right here is the peptide pulse. But because peptides are not magic, we know that they're signals. And signals only work when the system is ready. The compound is correct. The dose is appropriate. It's not a peptide problem. It's a sourcing problem. The source must be trustworthy. If any one of those breaks, the entire protocol becomes a liability, quite honestly. So I really want you to look at this and really start to think about what is happening in this market. If this is already making you rethink the way that peptides are being talked about online, subscribe to the Peptide Pulse. This is where we separate peptide science from peptide hype. This is where the truth comes forward. So how do you protect yourself? Let's start with patients and consumers. The first thing you need is to understand the COA. COA stands for Certificate of Analysis. It's simple. It's supposed to be that document that helps to confirm it. You should be having oversight. It should identify the compound. It should identify the purity. It should show the testing method. It should show where the testing came from. It should identify that lab. And for any injectable products, you want to make sure that you're including the sterility and endotoxin considerations. For clinical settings, this matters because endotoxins can trigger significant inflammatory responses. So, that's a huge thing. Most people are trying to reduce their inflammation. Sterility problems can create infection risks. Incorrect dosing can create safety concerns. Misidentified products can create completely unpredictable outcomes. Your body doesn't even know what to do with it. It's a foreign substance, whereas we know peptides are signals that your body already produces and makes. It's not foreign. Here's the question every patient, every person, every consumer should ask before starting a peptide protocol. Where is the peptide sourced? Is it coming from a licensed compounding pharmacy? Is it coming from a source, that really operates under those sterility guidelines? Could you see the COA? Ask your provider for a COA. They'll show you. Does the COA match the lot being used? So on the vial, it'll have a lot and a batch number. It should match that COA. Is there identifying testing? Is it showing what's actually in there? Is there sterility testing? So make sure that you're asking these questions. Ask your providers, okay? And so if there's a simple rule, okay? A legitimate provider should not try to defend their peptide or feel offended by any of these questions. A legitimate provider will welcome those questions and will be able to provide it if needed, because those questions tell the provider that you're taking your health seriously, that you want something that's going into your body to be safe. Now, let's talk about practitioners. If you are a practitioner, and your sourcing is not a small detail. So just know this, as a practitioner, sourcing is not a small detail. It's not a back office issue. It's not a cost issue. It's not a clinical risk issue. Well, technically it is. It's a clinical risk issue. You have to know what you're doing. It's making sure that you're documenting everything. You're making sure that, obviously you're protected, making sure that you have the right consent for that patient so that you're sharing with them exactly what you're giving them. And so if a patient is harmed because obviously of a product coming from an unverified source, the question will not be, did the peptide sound exciting? The question will be, what did you do to verify the safety, quality, and the sourcing and appropriateness? That is why third-party testing, pharmacy documentation, sourcing documentation, proper prescription, meaning that you're prescribing to that patient and giving them the clinical oversight, is right. The cheapest source is rarely the safest source. A peptide vial is not just a peptide vial. The price reflects more than just a powder. It reflects the facility, it reflects the testing, it reflects the handling, the documentation, all the things that go into making sure that what is in that vial is actually in that vial and is safe. If none of these things exist, you're not getting a deal, you're actually taking a risk. So let's talk about some red flags. Now, let me give you some of these red flags. If you see these, slow down, making sure that you're actually talking to a provider or somebody that understands what they're doing. If it's labeled for research purposes only, no. Even if it's coming from a clinic for research purposes and they say that you're going into their research for that said condition, just realize research has to be on a specific condition, not an end-all be-all, and you can choose that peptide for anything. If there's no physical address to track back where that product came from, no verifiable company information, if there's no lot-specific COA, again, COAs are issued, making sure that that COA matches what the lot is on the vial. And make sure that there's actually a lab name on that COA. That's important. It's not just something that has been, PDF identified and then, ChatGPT switched over. That's what a lot of people are doing. Price is dramatically lower when there's legitimacy coming in, meaning that if the price is cheap and too good to be true, well, who knows what's actually in that vial? Because the claims that sound too good to be true typically are. Influencers giving protocols without sourcing accountability. The buy 5, get 10 free, the BOGO, all these things. You've got to be careful with these things. The vendor must be legit. And especially if it's, trust me, bro science, or, hey, this vendor's legit, bro. Yeah, it's all good. That's not quality control. That's just vibes, and vibes are not sterile. And so we want to make sure that what we get is actually sterile. And so think seriously. This is where people have to literally grow up a little bit in the peptide conversation. You have to know this is not just biohacking. It's biology. This is chemistry. This is compounding, and this is dosing. It's risk management. It's making sure that what you're putting into your body is safe. And if we want peptides to be taken seriously, we have to treat the sourcing conversation very seriously. So, again, if you want more direct peptide education without the hype, subscribe to the Peptide Pulse. My goal is simple: give you the truth, the science, and the clinical context so you make smarter decisions. So where do we go with this bigger picture? I want to go to the big picture here, the regulatory conversation, because it matters. Because when access is restricted, demand does not disappear. It actually just shifts. It moves. It moves into gray markets. It moves into online research and these chemical sites. Everything that's going to be happening with RFK and in July of 2026, it's not that the gray market's going away. It's probably going to get bigger. Price, demand, it moves into overseas supply chains, which is already there. It moves into private groups. It moves into places where there may be less oversight, less documentation, and less accountability. That is why regulated access matters. That's why working with a provider that understands this, or a health coach, or somebody that fully understands this and understands their sourcing matters. When people want these compounds badly enough, they're going to look for access. So, the real question is not, can we make demand disappear? We can't. The real question is, can we create safer pathways? Because if the only pathway people find is an underground source, they're going to take it. That's just what happens. But if trained providers, legitimate pharmacies, legitimate resources, responsible clinical systems can create a safer structure, then people have a better option. That's my option. I am not anti-peptide. I am not anti-biohacking. I'm more biooptimization. I'm not anti-innovation. I'm pro-safe access. I'm pro-clinical oversight. I'm pro-testing, pro-documentation, pro-patient protection. I think that's one of the most important things. And I'm very much against people injecting mystery powders because someone online said it worked for their shoulder, for their gut, for their brain, or for their weight loss. This is not medicine. This is not optimization. That's gambling with your biology. So, some final takeaways. Here we go. Here is the takeaway. Peptides are powerful because they are signals. But signal quality matters. Source quality matters. Dose accuracy matters. Sterility matters. Testing matters. And so does oversight. And the more powerful this field becomes, this peptide field that we are living in and is becoming more and more aware, the more responsible we have to become. If you're a patient, if you're looking and really looking to get into peptides, ask better questions. If you're a provider, build better systems. If you're a clinic, know your sourcing. If you're a biohacker, don't confuse access with safety. Don't just sell something for a quick buck. I'm just speaking to you right now, those biohackers, the affiliates. This is something that's going into somebody. And if you're listening to this in a clinic waiting room right now or wherever you are, here is the one question I want you to ask your provider today. Where are my peptides sourced? And can I see the quality documentation? That question alone will tell you a lot. A legitimate provider will not hide from that question. They'll be proud to answer it. Because good medicine, good providers, good practice does not fear transparency. It actually builds on top of it. That's the goal. That's ultimately what we're doing. This episode. I've been a little hype in this episode. It's been a lot of fun. I really enjoy this because I just wanted to bring some truth to you. So if this episode has helped you understand the peptide underground market more clearly, subscribe to the Peptide Pulse and share this with somebody who needs to hear it, especially if they're ordering peptides online. Not to shame them, not to scare them, not to make them, fearful of peptides, but to help them make a better decision. Search the Peptide Pulse on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeart. And next week, we're going to be switching gears. We're going to be talking about some other fun stuff about peptides for your brain. We're going to be talking about things that will help you to understand maybe this information a little bit better. Things like Samax and Selank, the anxiety focus and cognitive performance conversation that is getting louder every single month. So thank you so much.
Can we actually say that again?
Yeah.
Sorry. When it says "and next week,"
oh yeah.
And next episode.
Oh yeah, there we go. Okay. All right. Go. And the next episode, hang on. And the next episode, we're going to be switching gears. We're going to be talking about the peptides your brain already understands, Things like Selank and Semax, or N-acetyl-Selank and N-acetyl-Semax, the anxiety, focus, and cognitive performance conversation that is getting louder every single month. No dependency, no cognitive fog, just the possibility of calm, clear signaling up here. I'll see you in the next episode of the Peptide Pulse. Precision, power, and life-changing potential. I'll see you next time.